We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
5 hosts, 5 opinions,
5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news,
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5.
You got me good there.
Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah.
Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight on the unpredictable.
What did she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Well, I think it's the story that will finally bring down the BBC, and not before time. Let's go straight over to the Late Show Live. Base 4 is in Washington. What a place to be with this going on at the moment. The one and only Ben Leo. Ben, it's war at the BBC and the White House.
It's war. President Trump, of course, is known as the peace president. At least that's what he likes to call himself. But when it comes to the BBC, the gloves are off because, of course, they have now spoken publicly about the BBC's editing deception of the January 6th scandal. Why they took so long, I don't know. But I've got a great guest coming up imminently in just a few minutes. He's sat next to me right now. I'm very excited. Rob Crilly from the Daily Telegraph, top DC reporter here, who broke this story tonight. He will have all the backstage exclusive information. One question I have for him is whether President Trump will do what he did with ABC and the Kamala Harris interview and sue the pants off the BBC. Of course, he settled for something like $16 million on that front. Will we be seeing the BBC sued by President Trump? I'll find out very, very shortly, so stick around for that. Elsewhere, we're going to be talking about Joey Barton. Of course, he was convicted for 6 gross miscommunication tweets today talking about women's football. Those kind of tweets wouldn't have even raised eyebrows at the local sheriff's office over here in the UK, so we'll be discussing that. But more importantly, the big breaking story, the BBC. We're getting stuck into that now on The Late Show Live. Oh, and what a night it's going to be here in DC on The Late Show Live tonight.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Dear oh dear, it's not been a good week for Auntie, has it? Breaking tonight, the White House accuses the BBC of purposeful dishonesty and 100% fake news. We could have told you that years ago. That was after the Panorama documentary doctored a Trump speech to make it look like the president incited the January 6th Capitol riots. Also tonight.
I stick up for Viktor Orban. Not a lot of people do because in many cases they're jealous. They wish they did what he did. They would have no problems if they did what he did.
Yes, President Trump and Viktor Orban together again. 2 leaders the establishment loves to hate. But is it Hungary, the country, actually a modern democracy we should all be aiming for? Plus, only in Britain, a Lib Dem council orders a pub to remove the St George's Cross, there it is on your screens now, from its own wall after it popped up in a Reform UK video. It had been on the building for years, by the way, before that. Is this yet another example of patriotism being punished again? And elsewhere, former footballer Joey Barton is found guilty of 6 counts of sending grossly offensive messages online. But in America, his comments wouldn't have even made court. Is free speech in Britain officially dead? And of course, we're live in Washington, D.C., just yards from the White House, bringing you the stories America's talking about and that matter to Britain too, including this one.
And now a man who transitioned came up and looked at the bar. How much is it? 212 pounds. Oh, let me try it. Ring, bong.
They just keep winning, this administration. Another one for the admin. The US Supreme Court rules that all new passports in America must reflect biological sex, not gender identity. I'm Ben Leo. This is The Late Show Live, and your night's just getting started. All right, let's get stuck in, shall we? The major breaking news emerging out of DC tonight. The White House has accused the BBC of purposeful dishonesty and 100% fake news after a Panorama documentary doctored one of President Trump's speeches.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Dear, oh dear. Well, Pinocchio would be proud, wouldn't he? Caroline Levitt, the President's press secretary, has hit out tonight saying British taxpayers are being, quote, forced to fund a leftist propaganda machine after it was revealed the Beeb had spliced together parts of that Trump speech to make it appear he told supporters to fight like hell before the 2021 Capitol riots. Levitt told the Daily Telegraph in an exclusive story, this purposeful, dishonest, selective edited clip by the BBC is further evidence they are total 100% fake news. Every time I travel to the UK with President Trump and I'm forced to watch the BBC, it ruins my day listening to their blatant propaganda and lies. Well, the row has now drawn in former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who says he will stop paying the licence fee unless Director General Tim Davie resigns or explains the bias engulfing the broadcaster, quote unquote. And it follows a leaked 8,000-word letter from former BBC Standards advisor Michael Prescott, who accused executives at the Beeb of inaction over mounting evidence of bias, including one-sided Gaza coverage and censorship of the trans debate. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by the man who broke this story tonight, who is sending shockwaves all across DC and indeed the BBC, the chief US correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, Rob Crilly. Rob, good evening. Thank you for your company. Congrats on a fantastic scoop, first of all. Just tell us how this manifested today, because the original Panorama story was, what, a week or so ago? Why did the White House take so long to come out and comment about the BBC?
I think that's a really interesting question. I know that we were trying all week to get a response. They put out a rather watered-down kind of statement, a generic statement. I know that I think other news organisations were chasing the same story. Here's the thing. January the 6th is kind of awkward. Trump likes to talk about how the 2020 election was stolen from him. He's pardoned the January 6th protesters, but he doesn't really want to get drawn into the nitty-gritty of what happened on that day. It wasn't a great look for DC. It wasn't a great look for him as a president. He's made political capital out of some elements of that, and he's moved on. I think if this had been a speech about immigration or the border or the economy, and that had been changed, I think we would have heard from the White House a lot faster and a lot harder.
OK, tell us how it happened then, if you don't mind. So you were at the White House today, you spoke to Caroline Levitt.
That's right. I mean, it was my regular pool day. The Telegraph is part of the White House pool. So as everybody knows, there are now actually new restrictions on journalists operating in the White House. You used to be able to just walk up to Caroline's office and see if she was around and have a word. I made an appointment. I went in, sat down on her sofa, very well appointed. She's moved offices. The fire was roaring, rather cosy atmosphere. And of course, she was well aware of the story. And so as soon as I put it to her that, you know, there were questions to be answered by the BBC, she was only too happy. And she is a very slick operator. She knows how to give a good story. She knows the mind of the president as well. And she delivered, you read the quote there, I think she delivered a real sign of the fury of the White House in her response. And it was rather amusing. I travelled with her to Scotland over the summer, as your Bev Turner did as well. Yeah. We didn't stay in the same hotels, but of course you turn on the hotel TV and she was saying she was getting a dose of the BBC that ruined her day.
She went studs up, saying every time I travel to the UK with President Trump and I'm forced to watch the BBC in our hotel rooms, it ruins my day listening to their blatant propaganda. So, I mean, this must come directly from the president.
What people say about Caroline Levitt is she has a mind meld with the president. Other people in the press shop can't get away with this. They will often say, well, wait for the post on Truth Social. That's how you know what the president is thinking. Caroline Levitt is in the Oval Office all the time. She really is one of the few people around him who knows what he's thinking at any time. I was in the state dining room today for the visit of Viktor Orban. This would have been my question to the president. You know, what do you make of the BBC editing? So, you know, if you can't get a comment from the president himself, Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, is the next best thing.
Rob, can I ask you, have the BBC been in and around the White House this week since the Panorama story dropped? And, I mean, who's the... Is it Cathy Kay?
They have a whole slate of reporters. I mean, you also have Gary O'Donoghue, the reporter who got the interview with Trump actually earlier this year.
How have they been this week?
He was at the White House today, I noticed. I don't know if he was in for a meeting, for a dressing down, or quite what. Now, they come and go and do their reporting. They're part of the press pool. They may, for all I know, one of their radio correspondents may have been on Air Force One this evening. I suspect that would have been rather frosty. Remember, the Wall Street Journal is still banned from Air Force One because of their coverage of President Trump and his connections to Epstein. The Associated Press is barred from some events because of their reporting, refusing to use the term Gulf of America. This is a president who bears a grudge.
Can I ask you, President Trump has form suing broadcasters who get up to shenanigans. Of course, ABC, who did a similar thing. They spliced that interview, that 60 minutes interview with Kamala Harris during the presidential election last year to make her, the claim was, appear more favourable because her answers were rambling, incoherent, and they just generally made her look better. President Trump wanted billions from that case, from ABC. He eventually settled for something like $16 million. Do you think we could see something similar here with President Trump suing the BBC?
That's an interesting question. You know, you never know with this White House. My gut feeling is, I come back to the first point, I don't think they particularly want to relitigate all the events of January the 6th and that speech. I think they're happy to fulminate against the BBC. Do they want all that day's evidence? There are still question marks about what Trump was doing during the day and if he did enough to call off his supporters. My gut feeling is no. But you never know with this president.
Yeah, indeed. Well, it would be a development, wouldn't it? It's President Trump suing the BBC. GB News, Rob, just stick with us, because GB News can also bring you the details of a leaked email to BBC News staff from the new CEO, Deborah Turner. So in this email, this is extraordinary, she's commenting, Rob, on the Panorama story, the BBC becoming the story and being accused of fake news. In this email from Deborah Turner, she told her staff, quote, "I'm writing to you today because it's always difficult when the BBC becomes a story, as it has in some quarters this week. Like you, I work here because I care passionately about trusted news and impartial journalism. I take pride every day in the quality and consistency of BBC News. You will all have seen the news coverage following the leaking of a letter to the BBC board from Michael Prescott, who is a former advisor to our editorial guidelines and standards committee. You will also be aware that following this week's coverage, the BBC chairman has received a letter from Caroline Dinenage, the chair of the Commons Culture, Media and Sport Committee, seeking reassurance from the BBC. The chairman will be providing a full response on Monday, and this will be shared with you, but I felt it was important for me to come to you as CEO of BBC News before the end of the week." It kind of sounds like she doesn't really take the gravitas of the situation seriously there. I mean, that's my perception.
I was looking at that, waiting for the next page, because I thought that was just the preamble and the introduction to her saying either mea culpa, we've made a terrible mistake, or doubling down and defending the reporting, whatever. I mean, the BBC, I think we've seen time and time again, and I should point out, I'm a fan. I think it does generally good work. That might not be a popular opinion in this studio.
No, I agree, sometimes.
But one of the things they always get wrong is their response to crises like this, and they just can't get out of their own way. She should have said in there, OK, we got caught out, bang to rights. That wasn't edited in a professional manner, and this sort of stuff shouldn't be happening. We've made ourselves a target for the White House, and that's not a good place to be.
Do you think the White House have been aware this week over the domestic issues the BBC's been having? For example, the suspension of, Martine Croxall for believing in biological sex. Goodness me, who think they think of that? And also, you know, a few other bits and bobs that have been hanging around the BBC this week.
I hate to tell you this, but I think you've got a shutdown here. Trump has just come back from his very successful Asia tour. He had Central Asian heads of state and government at the White House yesterday. You have Viktor Orban today. He's off to Mar-a-Lago to play golf. I think the coverage of Trump, when it's as egregious as that January 6th speech we saw, that comes onto their radar. But I think the ins and outs of a presenter like Martine Croxall, I don't think they will be across.
OK, just reading some comments here on gbnews.com/you'll say. Ray Rodden, good evening, Ray. You've said, Ben, Caroline was forced to watch the BBC propaganda while in Britain. Just think how we'd be feeling over here as we're forced to pay for it, or get mafia-style harassment letters threatening to send the boys round if we don't pay up. Yeah, indeed. And Boris Johnson tonight, Rob, has said he won't be paying the licence fee until Tim Davies steps forward and explains himself.
Well, Caroline did say to me that it was terrible that British taxpayers are being forced to foot the bill for a leftist propaganda machine. So I asked her, I followed up and said, are you saying that British people shouldn't have to pay the television licence fee? She said, well, look, that's a matter of policy. I'll leave that to the president. But you know, Americans are always astounded by the way the BBC is founded. It's a very alien concept. And then to have to watch material that you don't believe in and you're paying for that, I think is a very strange concept for Americans to get their heads around.
Yeah, and look, I think the BBC does, this is my personal view, it does some good stuff, particularly on local radio. You know, I appreciate local radio and so on, and they do some good bits, but when you are literally forced to pay, or the heavies are threatened on you, and you see time after time the constant propaganda, and I agree with Caroline Levitt, it is propaganda. Let's look at the Gaza situation, when they went out instantly and said that Israel had bombed the hospital, when in actual fact it was Hamas who had some Duff rockets go off. You know, time after time, the Hugh Edwards scandal, they were so inept with Hugh Edwards that they didn't have a morality clause in his contract, and he's now claiming his, what is it, 300k a year BBC pension despite being a convicted paedophile. We can go on and on and on. So I think there's serious questions about the licence fee, but I won't ask you to wade into.
Well, I was just going to say quickly, I mean, Caroline Levitt has teed off against the BBC before, and it was about the Gaza coverage back in June, when she accused the BBC of essentially swallowing Hamas propaganda, being forced to issue correction after correction after correction because they'd taken a Hamas statement at face value. And then as the facts emerged, things looked rather different.
Well, there we go. That's why GB News are here in Washington, D.C., and that's why we are here, of course, with you back home in Blighty, the UK's #1 news channel for the 4th month running. Plug, pat ourselves on the back. I will take no hesitation in doing that. And, of course, you don't have to pay for us unless you want to be a member and get all the great exclusive access behind the scenes. Anyway, a BBC spokesperson has told GB News tonight, while we don't comment on leaked documents, when the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. Keep your comments coming in, gbnews.com/your say. Kevin, you said, I still want to know how Caroline was forced to watch the BBC. Maybe she was in a hotel. Which hotel was she in?
I don't. One I can afford, but you click on the TV and what's the first channel that comes up? BBC One.
Yeah, I've been to plenty of hotel where I've been looking for GB News, and maybe it's not tuned in properly. So
actually, she was probably staying at Turnberry. She could have asked the boss to.
Maybe we'll sort that out. I mean, that's GB News' next mission: get GB News up in Trump's golf courses. Right, coming up on the Late Show Live.
All of us here today do not want to see our election victory stolen by emboldened radical left Democrats, which is what they're doing, and stolen by the fake news media. That's what they've done and what they're doing. We will never give up. We will never concede. It doesn't happen. You don't concede when there's theft involved.
Yeah, I can guarantee this. This story is going to roll on all weekend long. Big questions remain. Will President Trump sue the BBC as he did with ABC? Chances maybe, quite slim, but the possibility is still there. What will Tim Davies say? Boris Johnson, one of thousands, I suspect, who are threatening not to pay their licence fee. So we'll see how that develops. The breaking news from the White House is tonight, if you're just tuning in, is that the president, well, his administration at least, has accused the BBC of being a left-wing propaganda machine. We could have told you that years ago. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
isn't it?
because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point.
Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Dawdney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk then?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to The Late Show Live. I'm Ben Leo, and the big story tonight, rocking Washington, sending earthquakes all across Great Britain, and indeed the BBC and their officers, is that President Trump's administration has absolutely slammed the Beeb tonight for their involvement in the Panorama splicing video scandal, deceit, fake news, all of it. Great comments coming in on your say. Auntie Banana has said, "Hi Ben, I'll tell you when we're forced to watch the BBC. In public hotel areas, lounges, breakfast areas, etc. It's constantly on when there's no control of the channel by guests. If it's not 24/7 BBC News, it's Sky, so we're all forced to." I'll tell you what though, GB News is changing that. When I was in the UK before I left here for DC in August, early September, my local gym, I won't name the gym in case they get cancelled and the mob are at their door, but a brand of local national gym that I attend, they had GB News on in every TV in the gym. And that happened at two separate branches actually, one in London as well, one in Sussex. And Rich, you've said, the question is, would Keir Starmer know about this scandal, seeing as it's government funded? That really would upset the special relationship. Rich, I highly doubt it. But the big question lingering tonight, which we'll get stuck into, is will President Trump do what he did with ABC News and CBS and just sue the pants off them for millions of dollars? Right. So, the breaking news is that the White House, of course, has accused the Beeb of purposeful dishonesty and 100% fake news over that Panorama documentary, which doctored one of Trump's speeches.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Super talented White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt has gone studs up on the BBC tonight, telling The Telegraph this purposefully dishonest, selectively edited clip by the BBC is further evidence they are total 100% fake news. Every time I travel to the UK with President Trump and I'm forced to watch the BBC, it ruins my day listening to their blatant propaganda and lies. Welcome to the club, Caroline. Well, let's get more reaction with Errol Moorcock, American political strategist and spokesman for Republicans Overseas UK. Errol, thanks for your company. Wow, what a development tonight. They took their time, I'll say that, to comment on this scandal. It's been about a week since the original story came out, but tonight the Trump administration has taken their gloves off and really given it to the BBC, Errol.
Absolutely, and it has been a little bit of a delay. I think maybe they were keeping that in their pocket. I'm not sure. They usually are a little bit quicker. So I think perhaps this was a real offense. I think the blatant sort of overt misrepresentation that those two clips you just showed your audience would convey to anybody. I've had people, granted, I don't expect people who watch the BBC to be the most erudite individuals, but I've had people who expressed to me that J6, wow, he led this rebellion, he led all of this. And I guess if that was how you got your reference point, just that video, how can I blame you, right? And so then the question comes, what do the British people want? Because ultimately, what we do as Americans, if our president or if somehow sues the BBC, this will all come out in the wash. But what is the British citizen? What is their experience watching the news, being lied to about the president of, you know, I think one of your greatest, if not your best ally? So I think it's sort of hurtful to Donald Trump. He takes things personally, and I mean that. He takes things personally when, you know, it's 10 years of disrespect. And now the ball is in his court, and I think he might lob it back quite fervently.
Well, Errol, I'll tell you what a good handful of Brits, at least, think about the BBC, and it's that for years and years and years, echoing the comments of Caroline Leavitt, they have at many a time, not consistently, but many a time, been guilty of just outright lies or just complete bias. We saw a great example, which Caroline Leavitt cited some weeks ago or months ago, was the December bombing of a hospital in Gaza, instantly coming out and saying that Israel had bombed the hospital. It wasn't, it was Hamas with their dodgy rockets, which went awry and blew the hospital up, killing dozens of people. That's just one example. Even this week, Errol, as well, you wouldn't have heard about this, but domestically in the UK, the BBC suspended one of its top newsreaders because she was reading the autocue about a trans story, and the autocue said pregnant people. And she said pregnant people, women, and then carried on. She was suspended for correcting that and saying, oh yeah, biological reality exists. Errol, my big question now is, will President Trump do what he did with ABC News and CBS News in the US and sue the BBC in the UK?
I think he does. I think he has good course to do it. I think the BBC also has US entities as well. Whether that might be in the UK or the US, that lawsuit will come.
Wow, Errol, yeah, that really would, if we've got an earthquake now, if shockwaves are going through the BBC offices right now, President Trump suing them would be something stratospheric. Errol Moorcock, American political strategist and spokesman for Republicans Overseas UK, thank you very much. Right, let's bring in my panel here in Washington, D.C. Former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett makes his debut on the show, fresh from London, and Senior Research Fellow for Border Security and Immigration at the Heritage Foundation, Simon Hankinson. Good evening, chaps. Thank you for your company. Great to see you. Matthew, welcome along. How was your flight to D.C.? What a great time to come.
It was. I got the Amtrak. I was in New York. First part of the week, seeing what was going on with Zoran Mandami. He's obviously been catching the headlines all over.
Oh, you celebrating his win, were you?
We were out and about. We were, seeing what was going on. And I came in yesterday. I was at a conference today, put on by some former Obama staffers and stuff like that.
Well, look, you've arrived in DC on a momentous evening because, look, the BBC, again, dealing with a scandal they shouldn't be dealing with. What's your take on all this chaos?
It's not a great look. I think also when you allow Donald Trump to have the moral high ground and say somebody's purposely dishonest, there's irony sort of dies a little bit in my book. However, there was enough to go on if you really wanted to sort of show Donald Trump for what he was that day, whether that be the text that he sent to Mike Pence at the time and the fact that he clearly didn't want these election results certified. All evidence seems to show that from all that was in attendance. So why have you done this? You've left yourself open to the worst type of criticism. You're supposed to be the state's trusted broadcaster, and therefore people are going to see this as, well, is it really truthful what I'm watching? So I think it's deeply disappointing, really.
Do you think he'd sue the BBC?
I can see it. I think he has more of a relationship with the media here and a dislike for them. I wonder if his like and love of Britain will maybe he won't do that. I'm in two minds on this.
Good point as well. And Simon, Rob Crilly from The Telegraph, who broke this story tonight, big scoop, he suggests maybe the administration here doesn't really want to go down the January 6th route again. It was in the past, whatever happened on that day, I don't think personally President Trump incited anything, but it's been done now, and it's whatever happened isn't a good look. What's your thoughts on this situation?
Look, I agree with Carolyn Levitt, but this isn't Donald Trump's problem to fix. This is the BBC's problem to fix. Heads ought to roll. This is professional malpractice, right? They're the national broadcaster. Everyone is forced to pay a license fee if they have a radio or TV, and they expect to have neutral, unbiased coverage. Now, we've all known that it hasn't been neutral and unbiased ever since I left, 30 years ago, but at least they made a pretense. And this time, it's clear they cut and pasted and edited to make a political point, to gain traction for their side, the way they did with Gaza, the way they did with gender ideology, the rape gangs. So I would say they have to do some house cleaning.
What's the perception of the BBC from Americans? Because years ago, granted, the perception was the BBC, internationally trusted, well respected. I think many Brits now, that's the whole reason, by the way, GB News was formed, to try and combat the absolute leftist propaganda from the likes of the BBC. But do Americans now sort of latch on to that train of thought?
I think Americans tend to be about 20 years behind the times when it comes to Britain, because that we don't follow it as closely, we don't follow the politics closely. I think the BBC is coasting on the fumes of its reputation as the unbiased state broadcaster, and it is chipping away at that reputation, and this is a huge blow.
Indeed. Some comments on your side. Eddie, good evening, Eddie. Hope you're well, mate. You've said, I hope Trump takes on the BBC. They should be ashamed of what they've done. Can you imagine if GB News had done the same? Ofcom would be having a fit and trying to close you down. Indeed. And Paul said, Ben, Matthew Torbett was campaigning for the Commie Mamdani. I think he was, and we'll get stuck into that a bit later on. But sticking with the topic at hand, Linda Jubilee is live now from our studio in central London. Linda, you didn't used to work for the BBC, did you? I know you worked at Fox News in New York at one point.
Well, I was the Fox News Asia Bureau Chief, but before that I worked at Sky News, which is how I started in television. Before that, I was in Fleet Street.
Yeah, so you've definitely got some experience. Well, knowing your background and your years and years in news and broadcasting and journalism, what's your take tonight on this extraordinary development from the White House taking aim at the Beeb?
Well, I can completely understand it, because in all my years in television where I've seen lots of dodgy editing going on, I've never actually seen an edit like this take place before. And I think that Simon Hankinson is quite correct. This is a kind of professional, gross misdemeanour, if you like. It's a very, very serious state of affairs. Now, since I first moved into television, there have always been thoughts about and calls for the licence fee to be abandoned. It is very unfair, in my opinion, that people pay a licence fee for having a television set when actually they were watching, when I was young, half a dozen channels, but now they're watching loads of streaming channels, lots of channels. There's no real logical reason for paying their licence fee, and the clamour goes on and on and on. And what I think we see here is that it's reached a tipping point. We're now at an ignition point. Now I think the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davie, will have to, I think that he will have to think very seriously about what future the BBC holds for him. But I also think that the BBC will have to stop thinking in terms of not charging a licence fee. We can't go on this way with the number of things that have been, the tsunami of things that have been going on over recent weeks, one after the other, have added a great deal of momentum into a situation which is very, very damaging for the BBC.
Matthew, last year I think it was a record. 300,000 people stopped paying the licence fee, 300,000 extra people. Where does the BBC go from here? Do you think they would ever consider abandoning the licence fee, or would the government force them to do that?
I don't know. I mean, I pay it because it's what we've always done. I think if somebody comes up with a different idea, you know, why don't we revisit that? It clearly is where the most of their revenue comes. I think the bigger question is, as Linda says, one, Tim Davie, a lot of things have happened on his watch just this year, and you sort of go, well, you know, is it his poor leadership? But I think if there is I'm not saying there is, but if there's a potential rot at the BBC, you've got to go after the people that are working on that Panorama programme. It's them that have done this. You know, is it right to expect Tim Davie to be across every single newsroom decision? I don't know, but certainly they're the ones that we need to be looking at.
Simon, do you think the White House will let this rest, even if President Trump doesn't sue the BBC? Do you think that there's any repercussions, for example, here in DC, maybe rescinding some seats in the press briefing room, or not speaking to them, or not giving them a question at press briefings, or even banning them for the likes of Air Force One?
I don't think they'll let it rest. I think they'll keep their eye on them, and they'll be looking for other evidence of bias and unprofessional conduct, for sure. Whether they take it out on them in the ways you described, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'll say again, look, I don't want to use this opportunity to circle like a vulture on the BBC's carcass, but this kind of stuff is the precise reason GB News was founded, was it 4 years ago now, and also the precise reason why for 4 months running GB News has now been the UK's #1 news channel, beating Sky News for all of July, August, September, October, beating the BBC News channel for the same period. In increasing numbers, people are turning to GB News because, I'll just say it, we are honest. We are, yes, we give opinion, I give opinion, but we are obliged, I'd say more so than the BBC, because Ofcom have such stern eyes on us, to give both sides of the argument, both views, and we do that consistently more than anyone else. And as Eddie said on your say, could you imagine, Linda, just final word, if GB News did what the BBC did, caught red-handed with their pants down?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, it would be absolutely horrendous. But let me say, because I think Matthew was saying, you know, Tim Davie is kind of heavy, the head that wears a crown. The actual misdemeanour here in this case is Panorama. That's not exactly true when you look at the thing in its entirety. If you think back to Bob Vylan and the Glastonbury debacle there, where he was singing, you know, chanting "Death, death to the IDF" out into the audience, you know, at the end of the day, that's not the poor guy in the OB unit that's got his finger on the button that's to blame. It's not even the producer on the ground that's to blame. Tim Davie was actually at Glastonbury, somewhere else on the campus, and he needed to carry the can. Now, you can't keep doing that and expect him to remain in place.
Zaphod, on your say, has said the government and the BBC should, at the very least, apologise to President Trump for the fake video. Again, maybe not the government. I think, you know, it's the BBC here, but the BBC, I argue now, should come out and just say sorry, mea culpa. Linda, thank you for your company. We'll catch up later on in the show. A BBC spokesperson has told GB News, while we don't comment on leaked documents, when the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. Well, that's all right then, isn't it? Coming up on The Late Show Live.
From that moment, the elected representatives of the British people will be running the British government.
This is a great story, one to set you, to get you riled, actually. It's a good talker as well. Only in Britain could you get done in for painting a St George's cross on your pub. A local boozer has been ordered to cover up the cross by the local council. It's been up there for years, by the way, but it was only after the cross appeared and the pub appeared in a Reform UK promotional video that the council took action. I'll bring you the full story very shortly, but also tonight.
I stick up for Viktor Orban. Not a lot of people do, because in many cases they're jealous. They wish they did what he did. They would have no problems if they did what he did.
President Trump welcomes his good friend Viktor Orban of Hungary to the White House today. It was an extraordinary press conference and questions with reporters. But it got me thinking, watching what was going on there today in the White House. Is Hungary the kind of democracy Britain should be aiming to follow? I'll tell you why. Today's meeting may just prove that. This is The Late Show Live, only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I see people attacking others online. It's a reflection of them, right? It's a reflection of where they're at,
who they are
in their life. I think Joey Barton hates himself.
Welcome back to The Late Show Live. Joey Barton was found guilty today in court for grossly offensive ex-post, but my question is it another example of the erasure of free speech? I'll tell you what, his tweets wouldn't have even raised the eyebrows of the local sheriff's office here in the United States. That's coming up very shortly. But first, get a load of this. A Liberal Democrat-run council in Wiltshire has ordered a pub landlord to paint over the St George's Cross all over the front of his pub, hours after it appeared in a Reform UK video. So the pub landlord says the flag, there it is on your screens if you're watching on TV, the flag went up for the World Cup in 2022, years ago. Not because of politics, but because the council says it breaks planning rules because the pub is a listed building. So just to clarify, this went up in 2022. It's been fine since then. The council haven't said a word. And an hour after the pub and the cross appeared in a Reform UK video, an hour, the council got in contact and said, take it down. In America, you're more likely to be fined for not flying the flag. Well, let's get the view of political commentator Matthew Stadden, who joins me live down the line. Matthew, good evening. Thank you for your company. What's your take on this, Matthew?
Well, the council, as you say, they say that this is a planning issue.
Yes, it is a planning issue, but do you not think it's a little bit suspicious that it's been up since 2022 and the council only getting contacts an hour after it appears in a Reform UK video? Come on.
But what are you alleging? I mean, I can't speak for the council. It's possible that...
Matthew, stop playing silly buggers. It's obvious what I'm alleging. The Lib Dem-run council are playing politics and don't like a Reform UK councillor having a St George's flag on the pub.
It's equally possible that it only came to the council's attention when they saw this video, and the council is there to uphold planning law. But I think isn't there a much more interesting, wider conversation or debate that we could be having about this movement that we've been seeing in this country? I think it was primarily over the summer, wasn't it? The Raise the Colours movement, and questions around our flag, around the English flag, and perhaps also around the British flag. And my view of that movement, and I'm not sure I've actually ever talked about that movement on TV. So
you think it's racist, do you?
Rather than putting words into my mouth, why don't you listen to what I've got to say? Because you've invited me on.
Well, I know what you're going to say, but go on then.
My view of that movement is that although those who seem to set it up described it as patriotic and about unity and welcomed everyone to take part in it, the effect of the movement, I think, was highly divisive. You got plenty of people coming out in support of it, but you get a lot of people coming out against it. And you've got some people who did feel threatened by it. Now, I'm very proud of England. I'm very proud of Britain. But in my view, if you're flying the flag from lampposts in the street, you're not projecting an image of patriotism to the world, showing the world that you're proud of your country. To me, there's the possibility that it's sending a message of division and hostility to your neighbours. So when I fly the flag, when I support the England football team, cricket team, rugby team, or I put the England flag up when England win a game of sport on social media, I am projecting my pride in our great country to the world. But when I see flags draped over motorways, as I did in the summer, or from lampposts, my view is that the intent there, at least from some, is to be divisive, not to bring people together.
Okay, even if the intent was there from one or two people with that train of thought, that does not mean the rest of the nation should be punished for proudly flying the flag across their country. And Matthew, honestly, if you feel like that, come to America. You would have kittens, my friend. You'd be on the first plane back to Heathrow because you need a safe space in the UK.
Ben, I was in America before you were born, my friend. America have, in my view, a very healthy relationship with their flag. Unfortunately, and it is a unifying symbol. Unfortunately, in our country, it's been a much more divisive symbol internally. Of course, we fly the flag when England are in World Cups or European Championships. You get flags draped all over the place. That is projecting unity and patriotism when we are coming up against other countries. The problem with the Raise the Colours movement, as I interpreted it, was that it was divisive within communities and within our country. And I suspect you can see that, Ben.
No, not really. I think if you have a problem with the flag, with the flag of your own nation being proudly flown in the streets and on buildings and so on, just, go elsewhere. If you don't like it, go elsewhere. This is Britain, this is England, this is our great country.
Elsewhere. Ben, you keep trash-talking Britain from Washington, D.C. I'm here in Britain saying how proud I am of our country. You keep mocking Britain from where you're sitting in the studio.
Britain, saying that people that fly the St George's Cross are racist. You are the one trash-talking Britain, calling the great people of our country racist and divisive.
I didn't call them racist, Ben.
Flag.
You're putting words into my mouth. You're putting words into my mouth.
That's what you're saying. Look, Matthew, I'm not stupid.
I didn't call them racist.
I'm not stupid. Our viewers aren't stupid. You might think because some of us are Brexiteers that we're stupid and uneducated.
Divisive.
Okay. We know what you think. Matthew Southern, I appreciate your company nonetheless at this early hour. Thank you for your contribution. We'll catch up soon. gbnews.com/your say. Still ahead on The Late Show Live.
Where are you from?
BBC.
Here's another beauty.
It's a good line. Impartial, free and fair.
Yeah, sure.
Oh, well, maybe that's not the case anymore, because breaking tonight, the big story sending shockwaves across Washington, D.C. and London, particularly the BBC officers. The White House is accusing the Beeb of fake news and left-wing propaganda. I'll bring you the latest update from Washington, but also on the show tonight, I'll bring you the details of a case which has seen a criminal conviction in Britain, but probably wouldn't have even made it to court in the United States. There he is, the man on your screen now, Joey Barton, done, convicted for 6 counts of gross malicious communication for some tweets. Is free speech under threat in Great Britain? Back in a tick on The Late Show Live.
GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk
No,
now?
that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact that Trump made a good start, no.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to The Late Show Live. Now, did you see this today? Former footballer Joey Barton has been found guilty of 6 counts of sending grossly offensive social media posts aimed at broadcaster Jeremy Vine and football pundits Lucy Ward and Eni Aluko, 2 women. The court heard Barton compared the women to the serial killers Fred and Rose West and used an offensive slur when referring to broadcaster Jeremy Vine. Joey Barton says he's the victim of a political prosecution and will be sentenced on December the 8th. He could face prison. Is this an example of Britain's war on free speech gone wrong? Let's take the views now of journalist, commentator Candice Holdsworth. Candice, what's your take on this? 6 tweets. I'm a bit perplexed, to be honest with you. It's you know, he could face prison for a series of tweets. And what's your take?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, come on, the world of online journalism is rough. I've come up through the world of online journalism, and people have said the most vile things about me, everything under the sun you can think about. I promise you, on X, the mute button is your friend. And this is the problem. I think in our culture, we've sort of got used to this, that we can police offence and we can police speech, and that free speech doesn't matter. And this is what the non-crime hate incidents were about, which American audiences, I think, do know about, with the prosecution of, or the arrest of Graham Linehan. And you've got teenagers who have got a record for a non-crime hate incident for saying someone smells like fish. You know, I mean, you can actually end up in a background check. I think what he said was vile, it was juvenile, stupid, but I don't think it needed to go to court.
Yeah, it's stupid, wasn't nice, whatever. It was, you know, insensitive, offensive. I don't think you should be criminalised for it. I'm going to bring my panel now, Candice. Matthew Torbett and the Heritage Foundation Border and Security Research Fellow, Simon Hankinson. Matthew, your take on this?
It's deeply unpalatable, as Candice said, and I think from Joey Barton's previous remarks in the past, he obviously holds, you know, misogynistic beliefs about women footballers, women pundits. The problem you have is to police offence is very tricky because everybody, you know, feels differently about things, and therefore it's for me it's hard to see where the threshold would be on this sort of stuff. So again, I'm a bit uncomfortable with it sometimes.
Yeah. Simon, would these tweets, would they, as I keep saying, raise the eyebrows of even the police here in the United States? You've got the First Amendment, of course.
I don't think they would. I think, you know, you give someone enough rope to hang themselves and their reputation will suffer and people will scorn them. But as far as criminal charges, no. I mean, being a jerk is kind of your constitutional right.
Yeah, and if you're going to criminalise people for just being, I was going to say something else then, just being jerks, I mean, you could include half the Labour cabinet. Candice, do you think we have free speech in the United Kingdom?
No, I don't. I think it's on life support. I'm not the first person to say that, but I think it's absolutely true. You're not talking Britain down when you say this. We've got to be able to talk about the problem. I mean, we had a war veteran, a 100-year-old war veteran from World War II, saying this morning that he doesn't think fighting World War II was worth it, because he doesn't think we're the free country that we once were. This is very, very serious. We're in a very serious moment, and we have to get to grips with this.
Simon, do you think the UK has free speech? And also, just very briefly, is it free speech if your speech has consequences, as lots of people were telling me today on X?
Well, I don't think you can take the weakest person, you know, the most fragile ego, and have that be the standard. If someone is upset by what you say, maybe it's their problem and not yours. I mean, yeah, I see a real problem in Britain today. I read 1984 and I read Brave New World, and I thought that was fiction, but I'm seeing it come true today.
Yeah, indeed. And Candice, you mentioned there about talking the country down. Matthew Stadlen just accused me of doing that. Other people accuse me of doing it. I highlight the problems of our great nation because I love my country and I want us to pull ourselves up from our bootstraps and get our mojo back. I do it out of love, not to talk the country down. Candice, thank you for your company, appreciate it. More coming up in the next hour on The Late Show Live, including this.
Where are you from?
BBC.
Here's another beauty.
It's a good line. Impartial, free and fair.
Yeah, sure.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, it's a bit of a slow start for some of us, particularly towards the north and east today, but otherwise it is going to be a largely fine, often sunny day. Definitely the drier day of the weekend for most. That being said, as I mentioned, across some parts of Scotland and down the eastern side of England, there's a bit of cloud, there's some outbreaks of rain, but a lot of that's clearing away towards the northeast as we go through this morning with some fine sunny weather following in behind, albeit a bit of cloud and some rain pushing into western parts of Northern Ireland. Now, temperatures may not be quite as high as they were earlier on this week, but nonetheless they are still several degrees above average for the time of year, and with a decent amount of sunshine and some light winds, it's going to feel a bit warmer than you might expect for November. Now, as we go into this evening, are you heading away to a fireworks display? Well, the weather's looking fine for many places, except across Shetland. Could be a bit of rain, perhaps a bit of rain pushing into the Western Isles, but otherwise across much of Scotland and Northern England, it's fine with some clear skies around. Different story for Northern Ireland. Cloud, rain rain pushing in from the west, the wind's picking up too, but across the rest of England and Wales, well, it's looking fine and dry. The fine weather that we'll have through much of the day will continue as we go into the evening. So good news if you are planning to watch any fireworks. Later on overnight, we are going to see more cloud and rain spilling its way across Northern Ireland and into much of Scotland, staying dry with clear skies though across much of England and Wales. And with those clear skies, temperatures are going to drop a little bit lower than some recent nights. We could see temperatures in rural spots of England and Wales getting into low single figures, maybe even a touch of frost over some parts of Scotland. Obviously, the towns and cities will stay markedly milder. As we go into Sunday then, a dry start for many places, but cloud and rain is going to sweep its way eastwards. It's not looking particularly heavy, but there could be some heavier bursts, but also some drier interludes and something brighter following in from the west. Temperatures looking fairly similar to today, but obviously with less sunshine around, feeling a little less mild.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off limits. You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless. But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show. Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. On the Late Show Live tonight, it's all kicking off here in DC. Could President Trump be about to sue the pants off the BBC for their fake news deception? And should we be looking to Hungary and Viktor Orban as an example of a modern working democracy? Hello, good evening. On the Late Show Live tonight.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Wow, what a story breaking tonight. Bombshell. The White House accuses the BBC of purposeful dishonesty and 100% fake news after that Panorama documentary doctored a Trump speech to make it look like the president incited the January 6th Capitol riots. More on that in just a tick. Also tonight,
I stick up for Viktor Orban. Not a lot of people do because in many cases they're jealous. They wish they did what he did. They would have no problems if they did what he did.
President Trump and Viktor Orban together again. Two leaders the establishment loves to hate, don't they? But is Hungary actually the modern democracy we should all be aiming for? Plus, we'll also be diving headfirst into the stories from tomorrow's newspapers, hours before they hit the shelves. And I can tell you one story is dominating, and it's the BBC, of course. And we're live in Washington, D.C., just yards from the White House, bringing you the stories America's talking about and that matter to Britain too, including this one.
And now a man who transitioned came up and looked at the bar. How much is it? 212 pounds. Oh, let me try it. Ring, bonk.
A major win for the Trump administration. The US Supreme Court rules that all new passports here in America must reflect biological sex, not gender identity. I'm Ben Leo. This is The Late Show Live, and welcome along to the second hour, where the stories get hotter, the pace gets a little bit faster, and the brakes, hallelujah, have been dropped. Don't go anywhere. All right, let's return now to that major breaking news emerging out of Washington. Yes, the White House has been accused has accused the BBC, of purposeful dishonesty and 100% fake news over that now infamous Panorama documentary, which doctored one of Donald Trump's speeches.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Well, he said he was going to fight like hell that day. Is he now going to fight like hell against the BBC? Because Caroline Levitt, the president's press secretary, has tonight hit out, the gloves are off, saying British taxpayers are being forced to fund a leftist propaganda machine after it was revealed the BBC had spliced together parts of that Trump speech to make it appear he told supporters to fight like hell before they descended on the 2021 Capitol riot. Caroline Levitt told the Daily Telegraph, who broke the story tonight, this purposefully dishonest, selectively edited clip by the BBC is further evidence they are total 100% fake news. Every time I travel to the UK with President Trump and I'm forced to watch the BBC, it ruins my day, listening to their blatant propaganda and lies. The row has now drawn in former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, amongst many others, who says he will stop paying the licence fee unless Director General Tim Davie resigns or explains the bias engulfing the broadcaster. And of course, it follows a leaked 8,000-word letter from former BBC Standards advisor Michael Prescott, who accused executives at the Beeb of inaction over mounting evidence of bias across the corporation, including one-sided Gaza coverage and censorship of the trans debate. Let's get the reaction now from former Labour advisor Paul Richards, who's live from London. Paul, nice to be reunited with you once again. What's your take on this story that's breaking overnight? Should the BBC A, apologise, and do you think it's in the President's interests to sue the BBC, as he's done stateside with ABC and CBS?
Well, I think the answer to that, Ben, is yes and no. So, yes, the BBC really does need to get its house in order. This does seem to be an absolute, case closed example of editing to make a point. And Panorama needs to hang their head in shame because they have hitherto had a very good record of investigative journalism. But should we then start to consider, not having a licence fee, turning the BBC into a commercial station, undermining the public broadcaster? I would be very wary of that, because I think we need an ecology of broadcasting in the UK, which has both the licence fee funding, but also commercial as well, and give viewers a choice. So there's not just commercial. The BBC's license, as you know, Ben, is up for review at the moment, and it's only guaranteed up till December 2027. So this could not have happened at a worse time for Tim Davie and the governors of the BBC.
Yeah, and indeed all the other scandals breaking this week, not least suspending Martin Croxall, the newsreader, for daring to suggest there is only two sexes. Paul, can I ask you please about your thoughts from the comments of Caroline Levitt, who says this is further evidence that the BBC are total 100% fake news. Do you agree with that?
I totally disagree with that. I think the BBC has got a good international reputation generally, and I think its standards of journalism are normally very high. It uses trained journalists and has its own editorial guidelines, which are upheld. That's why I'm so disappointed in this particular instance from Panorama, which for 50-odd years has been a real flagship. And don't forget, this was a documentary. It wasn't the news coverage as such, so to call it fake news isn't quite right. And I think to sort of pivot from this ridiculous incident to like the whole of the BBC being leftist propaganda, in her words, I think it's a fairly big leap. You know, most people yesterday in the UK were enjoying Celebrity Traitors, you know, one of the biggest shows with the biggest viewing figures. The BBC tends to be something which delivers a product that people like. People like their local radio, they like the TV and all the rest of it. So when Panorama does this, it lets the side down, it lets the BBC down.
Yeah, well, I just think if the BBC are so confident in their product and they're so sure that people want to consume their material and their content, just bite the bullet. You know, go to a subscription service. Stop forcing the great British public to pay for your claptrap if they don't want it. If you want to watch GB News, which, by the way, Paul, as you'll know, is the UK's #1 news channel for 4 months running, you know, just put your reputation on the line and make people pay for a service via subscription. Netflix do it. Paul, hang tight. I'm going to bring in Linda Jubilee live from London, the broadcaster and journalist, and of course my panel here in Washington DC, former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett and the senior research fellow for border security and immigration at the Heritage Foundation, Simon Hankinson. Linda, your take on this, please. Should the BBC apologise first of all? And if they did apologise to President Trump and the administration, is that kind of a dangerous territory, a mea culpa that they just can't afford to deliver?
Yeah, that's the problem with any apology in this situation, is it is an admission of responsibility. So I think that we'll be a long time waiting for that one, so let's not hold our breath there. But this is a very, very serious situation, and even though my esteemed colleague Paul Richards says, well, this is a documentary, it's not news, I actually think the staff, some of whom I know on Panorama, would take exception to that, because they do think they're news. It's splitting hairs to say that it's a documentary and that news is news. It's not. It's the same thing. What they did here was a very, very serious misdemeanour, to actually join up two things that were opposing each other. This is not even like the interview where there was so much controversy, where an interview with Kamala Harris was actually spliced together, and that was really done to polish up on her very woolly delivery. This is actually distorting things to say the opposite of what was actually meant. So I feel that it's possible that the White House, for example, could take action here. That's likely that could happen, and I think that would be a problem for the Director General Tim Davie, because there have been a whole series of mistakes here, not just about this latest debacle with Martin Croxall and the other things as well, but it goes back many months before. You remember the whole debacle over the Glastonbury Festival? There was so much controversy there over shouts into the audience of death to the IDF. So I think there's a real problem here, and I think we are reaching a tipping point.
Linda, it goes back years, I'd argue. Hugh Edwards, you know, a paedophile amongst your ranks, and the inaction you took on that, the fact that he's still able to claim his pension because they didn't put a morality clause in his contract. 300 grand a year of licence fee money is going towards paedophile Hugh Edwards' pension. Then you've got, of course, Savile. Then you've got the likes of Martin Bashir and Princess Diana.
Yep.
It goes on and on and on. The BBC seems to have an addiction to just like a depraved sense of morality and standards, which is insane, really, when you have pretty much an unlimited budget. You're fleecing the great British public for your content and your operation, and you're still bungling the ball. Simon, can I ask you, please? Paul mentioned about the broadcast ecology in the United Kingdom, which is a phrase I think our good friend Adam Bolton, formerly of Sky News, mentioned once about GB News' involvement in the broadcast operations in the UK. You don't have a broadcaster in the United States where Americans are forced to pay for their content, do you? So who cares if the BBC is forced to go to a streaming service and actually put their balls on the line and get people to pay for their content?
Yeah, we used to have, we still have National Public Radio, public broadcasting that was funded by the federal government, but we stopped it this year because it was obviously a far left network that people are welcome to tune into and pay for, but that taxpayers like me shouldn't have to pay for. And if I were a British taxpayer paying a license fee, I would expect 100% unbiased news coverage. And it's like, credibility is like virginity. You can't lose 50% of it. It's all or nothing. And once you lose that credibility, it's game over. And I would be, if I were a politician, looking carefully at the license and the future of the BBC. And if I were a manager at the BBC, I would want to fire whoever did that editing so that it looked like I was policing my own house.
Matthew Torbett, can I ask you please about where the BBC goes from here? Tim Davie, is he under pressure to resign? Is this one scandal too many?
I think he's definitely under pressure. I will admit, though, I agree with Paul Richards, which viewers might expect me to. I think Celebrity Traitors is worth the licence fee alone, by the way.
Never seen it.
Deeply unserious for a moment. I think the problem you have with people like Tim Davie is he shouldn't really be a household name. You're essentially a backdoor CEO. You should be just seeing over the running of things going all over. But he's in the news for all the wrong reasons, and it is on his watch. So, of course, there's totally going to be under pressure. How they play it from here, I think, as Linda said, an apology will take some time and maybe court-ordered if there is going to be an apology, I imagine.
Yeah, and viewers, if you're just tuning into The Late Show Live on GB News, if you've been on a night out, a boozy night out, and ease up, and you're just stumbling along this breaking story now, let me just remind you what Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, has tonight said of the BBC. She has said, this purposefully, dishonestly, selectively edited clip by the BBC is further evidence that they are total 100% fake news that should no longer be worth the time on the television screens or the great people of the United Kingdom. Every time I travel to the UK with President Trump and I'm forced to watch the BBC on our hotel rooms, it ruins my day listening to their blatant propaganda and lies about the President of the United States and all that he's doing to make America better and the world a safer place. Paul Richards, are you surprised at the sort of honesty and the kind of studs up response there from the White House to the BBC tonight?
Well, I don't know who's forcing her to watch the BBC. The whole point is that there is, as I say, an ecology. There's choice. You can have different broadcasters in your hotel room. Well, there aren't any British hotels where it's piped in, compulsorily, and you have to watch it. It's not 1984. But if we throw the BBC out, and just say every station has to be commercial, I think we will rue the day. I think we will regret it. And it will lead to things like, good local journalism through the local radio disappearing and documentaries like the wildlife programs disappearing. The expensive stuff that commercials can't pay for, we will lose as a result. And I think to attack the entire BBC for a stupid mistake and bias by Panorama and Glastonbury and the other mistakes they've made, would be a huge, huge error, and I think we would all regret it.
Linda, what's your take?
Well, look, I don't want to chuck the baby out with the bathwater because I think that the BBC does do things like the great occasions of state very, very well, where a great deal of profound experience is required. But what I will tell you is that several years ago, I was at a very, very high-profile event with a senior member of the management team of the BBC, and he said when we were discussing finances of various broadcasters, actually, we don't worry too much about being financially secure because we know we've got the licence fee. Now, I think that's wrong, and I think it's insulting to TV viewers everywhere just to have that taken for granted. I think we live now in a broad landscape of many channels and much choice. We shouldn't be paying a licence fee for the television set when we watch so many other channels.
Yeah, I just want to read you and viewers at home a message here on gbnews.com/your say, and it's quite pertinent to this whole BBC conversation. It says, getting a bit sick of GB News, sorry about that. Why are we having to see and listen to the opinions of all these left-wingers? The whole of the BBC is pretty much made up of left-wingers. They hardly have anyone on who has alternative opinion. So why are we infested with them on here? If they want to spout their dribble, shouldn't they be spouting it on a channel where someone actually wants to listen to them? Well, this whole operation at GB News will set up precisely to combat that kind of leftist propaganda found at the likes of BBC and Sky. I don't want to sit here as a presenter in an echo chamber listening to people who are right of centre. Maybe sometimes I want to have my mind changed if the argument's good enough. Maybe I want to put my argument to people of another persuasion, such as Matthew Stadlen, and see how my argument stacks up in the grand scheme of things. I think it's a very dangerous, unhealthy broadcast ecology when we sit here in an echo chamber. And Simon, when I first arrived here in the United States end of August, I turned on the TV, I watched MSNBC, which is, I'd argue, far left lunatic channel. There were 5 people, 5 left-wingers, some were commies, sitting there all in agreement talking about, again, pertinent to this conversation, talking about January 6th, saying January 6th was on par with Pearl Harbor. January 6th was just as bad as 9/11. President Trump was a dictator and an authoritarian. All 5 of them sat round on a table nodding their heads. I was astounded because that would never be allowed in the UK and certainly not allowed on GB News.
Look, in my book, The 10 Woke Commandments You Must Not Obey, the 7th is trust the media. And they've lost the trust. I am willing to go on anybody's show anytime and talk about anything. Others like me who have experience, who are experts in particular fields, we don't get asked. We don't get on MSNBC. They were saying the other day on the show The View how conservatives were afraid to go on their show. Not at all. I can give you a list of 100 people that would happily go on tomorrow. They don't want us on. CNN has a token. They've got an excellent guy who goes on there and hits the ball out of the park every time. But they're not interested. The BBC has had me lined up 2 or 3 times. They drop it at the last minute. So they're very reluctant to have any semblance of balance. They want tame voices on their shows.
Matthew Talbot, who do you think has more balance generally across their news coverage, GB News or the BBC?
I think there's something to be said about the BBC, whether they're left, right or otherwise. I've always found the BBC to be quite a classist institution, I say at risk of never being invited on again. But similar to Simon, you picked up, you're dropped, you question whether they really want you on. They definitely pigeonhole you. I have been told by a producer of a flagship BBC show that the reason why I'm not normally invited on is because I'm seen as a GB News person. That's it. That's all I do. That's the sort of people that work there and what they view. What GB News does, look, whether I agree with it, whether other people agree with it or not, you do listen to other people, and that has to be welcomed regardless of any other wider MO, and that's why I come on and try and put my arguments across the same way that you'll challenge me on them.
Yeah, and I'm the same as you. I tell my producers I would rather do a whole 2-hour show of debates and conversation with somebody who I completely disagree with, because A, it's more entertaining, and B, as I keep saying, I don't want to live in an echo chamber. Linda, let me get your thoughts on this leaked email to BBC News staff from the BBC News CEO Deborah Turness. So it's in relation to the Panorama story which dropped around a week ago. In the email, Deborah Turness says to her staff, "I'm writing to you today because it's always difficult when the BBC becomes a story, as it has in some quarters this week. Like you, I work here because I care passionately about trusted news and impartial journalism. I take pride every day in the quality and consistency of BBC News, and you'll all have seen the news coverage following the leaking of a letter to the BBC board from Michael Prescott, who is a former advisor to our editorial guidelines and standards committee. You'll also be aware that following this week's coverage, the BBC chairman has received a letter from Caroline Dinenage, the chair of the Culture, Media and Sport Committee in the Commons, seeking reassurance from the BBC. The chairman will be providing a full response on Monday, and this will be shared with you, but I felt it was important for me to come to you as the CEO of BBC News before the end of the week. Linda, first of all, I don't really know what she's saying in that email to her staff. It seems like a waffle, but a word salad. But interestingly, they haven't, or she hasn't at least, admitted that they've done anything wrong. Do you think they've done something wrong with regards to the Panorama situation? Or do you think they're even consciously aware that somebody may be upset with what they've done in that programme?
Oh, I think they must be aware of it, but that's been part of the problem all the way along. Now, for a very long time, I think the BBC has been slow to take responsibility for things that have gone wrong, and they haven't shown any accountability. And I think that that's a problem. Now, that is a very carefully worded statement from Deborah Turness. I can understand why she's worded it that way. But again, it's the same thing again and again and again. If you're going to make a statement, make it clear and start working towards where you want to be in terms of accountability. And I don't see any sign of that in this statement.
Yeah, it just stinks of arrogance. I think they're arrogant to the bone, the BBC. Paul, last word to you. Are the BBC arrogant? Do you get that vibe from the management?
Well,
just reflecting really on the litany of scandals over recent years.
I was listening to the BBC radio today. Lee Anderson, the Reform MP, had an extended interview. Nigel Farage is hardly ever off Question Time. Matt Goodwin from GB News was on Question Time on BBC One this week. I don't think it is a leftist echo chamber or propaganda station. I think all views are heard, as they are on GB News, and that is both informative and entertaining television. But like I say, you know, to tar the entire BBC with a mistake by a stupid editor on Panorama, I think is a mistake.
OK. All right, guys, thank you very much. Matthew Talbot, you'd be pleased to know that More Cushion's mummy on gbnews.com/your say has said, Matthew, you may be a bit of a lefty, but GBN viewers still like you and want to hear your views, even if we don't agree. Hear, hear. And RS said, interesting that the best rated programme at the moment on the BBC was all about lies and deceit. Let that sink in. That's a reference to Traitors, no? I must admit, I've never watched Traitors. I heard the recent celeb version was fairly decent, but yeah, shame the news operation of the BBC isn't as good. Paul, thank you very much. Linda, thank you very much. A BBC spokesperson has told GB News, while we don't comment on leaked documents, when the BBC receives feedback, it takes it seriously and considers it carefully. Keep those comments coming in. gbnews.com/your say. Right, still ahead on The Late Show Live.
I stick up for Viktor Orban. Not a lot of people do because in many cases they're jealous. They wish they did what he did. They would have no problems if they did what he did.
Do you know what? I completely forgot this story was doing the rounds today amid the BBC scandal. Donald Trump met Viktor Orban, and it's got me thinking, is Hungary the democracy Britain, and indeed the rest of Europe, should be aiming to follow? I'll tell you why today's meeting proves it. This is The Late Show Live. No breaks. Back in a few seconds. I told you it was a few seconds. Breaking tonight, a masterclass in democracy delivered straight from the White House as President Trump met with Hungary's Viktor Orban, the Prime Minister. Hungary's doing what Britain won't and what the rest of Europe can't.
We are the only government in Europe which considers itself as a modern Christian government. All the other governments in Europe are basically liberal leftist governments. We are kind of a special island of difference in a liberal ocean in Europe.
What do you reckon about that? Viktor Orban says Hungary is the last island of Christian democracy in Europe. He says the rest of his European neighbours are leftist liberal governments, agreeing with one reporter that many of them had globalist agendas. I think that's obvious. And also, illegal migration in Hungary? Well, practically zero, much like the US. Because you don't just stroll in, you ask permission first, obviously. Simple, effective, working. But Brussels hates it. The EU has slapped Hungary with a €1 million a day fine for defying EU laws about asylum seekers. They've slammed the door shut and they're paying €1 million a day for the facts. That's €365 million a year just for refusing to take in asylum seekers.
In Hungary, the number of illegal migration is like that, zero. What is the consequence of that? We are under sanctions, financial sanctions of European Union, because we don't let the illegal migrations to come to Hungary and to the European Union as well. So we have to pay, just to inform you, we have to pay every day 1 million euro as a punishment to the Brazilian budget because we stopped the migrants. This is the absurd world we are living now in Europe.
Yeah, absurd indeed. What a joke, because here in Britain we pay nearly £6 million a day to house illegal migrants in hotels. Strange men, we don't know who they are, where they came from, what their intentions are. £6 million a day of your taxpayer money funds that. That's 8 times Hungary's fine for doing the exact opposite, closing the border shut. Hungary pays to protect its borders. We pay to pretend we still have any. And across the pond, of course, President Trump says Orban's the only European leader who's got immigration right.
He's been right on immigration. Look what's happened to Europe with the immigration. They have people flooding Europe all over the place, and it's hurting it. It's the crime rates are way up. A lot of bad things are happening. And they were wrong. They are flooding Europe with people from all over the world, and Europe is becoming a different place. And I tell the leaders all the time, you better stop or you're not going to have Europe anymore. It's a very dangerous thing they're doing.
So Hungary pays a fine for border control. Britain pays a price, a hefty price, for border chaos. So who's really got it right? Well, let's get the take now of White House reporter for The Hill, Julia Manchester. Julia, thank you for your company. It was an extraordinary interaction today between Orban and President Trump. I could have sat there for hours listening to it. What was your take? Is Hungary the kind of democracy the rest of Europe should be looking to emulate?
Well, I guess it depends what your view on Hungary is, but I think our takeaway from covering this was Viktor Orban really going into the White House to try to make a good impression on Trump. You know, this is 10 months into President Trump's administration, and you would think an ally like Viktor Orban would have been there beforehand, but we know that Viktor Orban was going in on essentially a charm offensive. He wants to get President Trump to approve an exception for Hungary to be able to purchase Russian oil. And of course, we know that President Trump has been, said to be slightly irritated with that because that makes his negotiations with other European countries more difficult. But from what we saw, I think this was a charm offensive between both of these leaders, because even though, not every relationship is completely smooth between world leaders, I think President Trump appreciates a world leader like Viktor Orban coming in there, praising his policies on immigration, and also notably slamming the Biden administration in his opening remarks, something I'm sure President Trump appreciated.
Yeah, the primary reason, as you rightly said, Julia, is for Orban's visit was because President Trump wants Hungary to stop buying and using Russian gas because he wants to bring the war to an end. Viktor Orban today was basically saying, look, we'd love to do that, but we are landlocked. We have no ports. We can't import our gas or our oil. And 95% of homes, residents in Hungary use gas. So we're in a bit of a tricky situation. I think it concluded with Orban saying they were going to go to Croatia, the Croatian government. There's a pipeline from Croatia, which is albeit a lot smaller, and see if they could get some more gas from that side of the country. But it remains to be seen how that will be resolved. But did you find it interesting how President Trump was keen to slam the rest of Europe, saying, as we've heard before, look, your countries are going to hell primarily because of immigration. It's out of control. He said there won't be a Europe left in the years to come, but he was keen, Julia, not to name any specific countries. Why doesn't he do that?
It's an interesting point, because I remember earlier in this administration, earlier this year, there was a very notable address Vice President Vance gave in Europe where he was slamming a lot of European countries for what he said was their left-leaning or liberal ideology. And we've continued to hear the Trump administration echo that. But as you correctly point out, they're not always, completely specific in those characterizations. I think the Trump administration is walking a very fine line here. There are, I think, cultural and political differences the administration has with many governments within Europe. But at the same time, I think, President Trump is very cognizant of the fact that, Europe as a whole is obviously a big player in this Russia-Ukraine war, and President Trump wants to end this war. He wants to play a role in ending this war. He wants to be known as a peacemaker, and it's very clear that he's been irritated by some of the bumps in the road that we've seen in this negotiation process between Russia and Europe. So I think President Trump, maybe throwing a bit of a bone or acknowledging what many of his conservative base feels here in the United States and his fans, conservative fans abroad might agree with, but at the same time not wanting to maybe call them out directly.
Yeah, interesting. The peace president, but I guess not when it comes to the BBC. Julia, hang tight. I'm going to bring my panel in here now. The former Labour Party advisor Matthew Torbett and the senior research fellow for border security and immigration at the Heritage Foundation, Simon Hankinson. Welcome back, chaps. Matthew, I'll start with you, if you don't mind, as the Brit here. Do you think, I mean, look, 365 million euros a year is a fine Hungary pays to the European Court of Justice for refusing to go along with their insane demands for Hungary to take in asylum seekers. That sounds like a bargain to me compared to £5 million a day on asylum hotels. Should we not be looking to Hungary for some advice and some tips on how to control our borders?
I think it's a bargain when that's only part of the reason. I think also it's because of cronyism and contracts going to friends within the Hungarian government, of which the EU found they broke laws of. I think, listen, you can be right on some stuff as a particular ideology. Anyone with a pair of eyes can see that, we haven't got a particularly strong border down by the Channel. However, I wouldn't look to Hungary as a sort of anything else. There's rampant homophobia. There's a judiciary that isn't independent and is, beholden to the president himself. You've got food inflation and the cost of living at about 30%. It's certainly not a bedfellow I would like to get in with, particularly when he's playing footsie with Putin and tickling President Xi's tummy.
Oh God, that's a sight to behold in my mind at this hour. Simon, is Hungary something to look, to gain inspiration from? I mean, are they a properly run democracy? I mean, Matthew Torbett's raised some interesting points there about how certain sects are run, not least the judiciary.
Look, you can criticize Hungary for a lot of things, but I was there a couple weeks ago. I was at the border with Serbia. They have protected the rest of Europe from mass migration over that border. Now they're coming to the UK and to France and Germany through other routes. But look, one of the reasons we had our revolution was because the king was telling people you have to house soldiers in your house. It was called quartering. Would you like it if someone told you that you had to take strangers, young men, into your house? No, you wouldn't. Well, Hungary doesn't want to be told by Europe that they have to take in unlimited numbers of people from other countries. They've made a decision. They want to protect their sovereignty. And they've made the same decision about woke. They do not want to be infected with this woke mind virus that's taken over the rest of Europe and Canada, Australia, and the United States. So I respect that position. Orban has done that. Yeah, he has his flaws. But if I were Hungarian, I think I would be pretty proud of that achievement.
So Matthew, you mentioned rampant homophobia there. What is the policy of gay sex relationships, gay marriage in Hungary?
Good question. It's either illegal or desperately frowned upon, and you will be judged accordingly in society. You might know yourself there, just checking. But I think, look, again, do you want to pay 30% extra for your food and drink? It is not an economic vision I think I would want to follow. And I think the problem for us as the UK, and this isn't to make any excuses for the governments either previously or now, I think we're always going to struggle because we're essentially end of the line. If you're coming across from the east, the only other place you could go is Ireland. You're not going to come all the way across the ocean to America. And I think unless you're going to have a strong border, and you're going to change the laws accordingly, whether that be some sort of safe and legal route or offshore processing or something like that, I think we're going to continue to have this issue. And it's a nightmare because there's an element of unfairness that's being tapped into because people are going, well, hang on a minute, why are we paying to put these people up? I'm having a right time of it at the minute. Inflation is stubborn. I feel more worse off than I ever have. And in fact, these people are having a right old jolly. And that's certainly what is being portrayed.
Julia, were you in the White House today, did you say?
I was actually not in the White House today, but I was watching everything play out from my desk at our bureau.
Yeah, the relationship between the US and Hungary seems pretty close. At one point, Viktor Orban was joking around with President Trump and his press secretary, Caroline Levitt, who, of course, we've covered a lot tonight, saying, can I have Caroline to come and work for my administration? Do you think Hungary is the key to ending the war in Ukraine? Do you think it's down to Viktor Orban to really, first of all, either stop buying gas from Russia so they really turn the screw economically, or, as Matthew Torbet has said, to stop tickling the feet of Putin and maybe have a stern word in his ear?
I think Hungary certainly could play a role in that, and I think President Trump realizes that. In fact, as Viktor Orban was arriving at the White House, one of the first things President Trump was asked by reporters is, is there a chance that you will meet with Putin in Budapest? And President Trump said, there's always a chance. There's a very good chance. So that's very, very telling. And, I think President Trump is going to use whatever means possible, really, to try to, play a bigger role as possible to ending this conflict. And he could see Orban as a vehicle to do that.
OK, well, he was busy in the White House today, and he's now, these are live pictures on your screen if you're watching GB News on television at home. President Trump, live pictures in Palm Beach, Florida. He's just landed in the Sunshine State after what would probably be, Simon, a 2-hour flight from DC. Do you know why he's in Florida? Why he's in Palm Beach? Mar-a-Lago, I guess.
Probably just going home for the weekend.
Is that what he does generally? He goes to Mar-a-Lago for the weekend? Matthew, you seem to know?
Yeah, he splits his time accordingly, similar to Biden. Biden would go back to Wilmington, Delaware at the weekend. I believe he used to travel on the Amtrak quite regularly. I just love those pictures, sort of hunched over. He's had a long week, moody teenager. He's about to fire off another truth about, God knows what. It's anyone's guess. But yeah, I think he tends to spend the weekend at Mar-a-Lago.
So there he is, coming off Air Force One at Palm Beach in Florida. Simon, he'll still work though, won't he? I don't think he'll do a Joe Biden where he looks comatose on a beach like Casper the Friendly Ghost.
No, I remember those pictures of him slumped over in that chair. No, Trump doesn't sleep much. He works. He's doing all kinds of things. And yeah, he spends a lot of time in Mar-a-Lago, but I think he's keeping busy.
Julia, last word to you. Do you begrudge President Trump going back to Mar-a-Lago? They call it, what's the nickname for Mar-a-Lago? Do they call it the second White House or something? The Winter White House, that's the one. Do you begrudge him going back to Mar-a-Lago?
No, I mean, we've seen other presidents do this. Like was said before, President Biden would go to Wilmington, Delaware. There's always going to be, whether it's a Republican or Democratic administration, the critics will, sort of criticize the president for traveling. But this has become a norm for President Trump. It's November in Florida. He's going to where the weather is warmer. And quite frankly, Florida is the nerve center for the Republican Party. So he wants to be there as much as possible. And then I'm assuming in the summer he will go to Bedminster, New Jersey, but no surprise there that President Trump's heading home for the weekend.
Yeah, and do you know what, Julia? I don't begrudge him going to Florida. My wife and kids, my 2 boys, were here last week visiting me in DC. We spent 1 day here in DC because, quite frankly, it's a little bit boring. We flew to Orlando, we went to Disney, we went to Universal, we went to Daytona Beach, and as a Brit, it was amazing to have sun on my skin in November, and everybody watching at home would appreciate that. So I don't blame him for, yeah.
I'm an Orlando native, so I love to hear that. That's my hometown.
All right, Julia, I'm coming around for a cup of tea. Put the kettle on. I'll be there after the show. Julia Manchester, White House reporter for The Hill, Orlando native. Very jealous. Thank you very much for that. Right, let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Still ahead tonight on The Late Show Live.
Oh, and one more thing. Remember how I told you a few months ago to stop sending us money? You can start again.
Oh, look what's happened. The begging bowl is out already. That's New York City's new socialist Muslim mayor already asking residents to dip into their pockets and give me your money again. Well, my panellist tonight, Matthew Torbet, who's visiting the United States, of course, from the UK, he's just been in New York. He was involved in Mamdani's election win. I'll get the inside scoop on what he's been up to very shortly. This is The Late Show Live on GB News. Back in a tick after your weather.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, it's a bit of a slow start for some of us, particularly towards the north and east today, but otherwise it is going to be a largely fine, often sunny day. Definitely the drier day of the weekend for most. That being said, as I mentioned, across some parts of Scotland and down the eastern side of England, there's a bit of cloud, there's some outbreaks of rain, but a lot of that's clearing away towards the northeast as we go through this morning with some fine sunny weather following in behind, albeit a bit of cloud and some rain pushing into western parts of Northern Ireland. Now, temperatures may not be quite as high as they were earlier on this week, but nonetheless they are still several degrees above average for the time of year, and with a decent amount of sunshine and some light winds, it's going to feel a bit warmer than you might expect for November. Now, as we go into this evening, are you heading away to a fireworks display? Well, the weather's looking fine for many places, except across Shetland. Could be a bit of rain, perhaps a bit of rain pushing into the Western Isles, but otherwise across much of Scotland and Northern England, it's fine with some clear skies around. Different story for Northern Ireland. Cloud, rain pushing in from the west, the wind's picking up too, but across the rest of England and Wales, well, it's looking fine and dry. The fine weather that we'll have through much of the day will continue as we go into the evening, so good news if you are planning to watch any fireworks. Later on overnight, we are going to see more cloud and rain spilling its way across Northern Ireland and into much of Scotland, staying dry with clear skies there across much of England and Wales. And with those clear skies, temperatures are going to drop a little bit lower than some recent nights. We could see temperatures in rural spots of England and Wales getting into low single figures, maybe even a touch of frost over some parts of Scotland. Obviously, the towns and cities will stay markedly milder. As we go into Sunday then, a dry start for many places, but cloud and rain is going to sweep its way eastwards. It's not looking particularly heavy, but there could be some heavier bursts, but also some drier interludes and something brighter following in from the west. Temperatures looking fairly similar to today, but obviously with less sunshine around, feeling a little less mild.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello viewers, welcome back to The Late Show Live. I'm Ben Leo. Now, another win for the Trump administration today. The US Supreme Court has allowed them to require new passports to list only an individual's sex at birth, which of course, as we all know, is male or female. The court throws a lower ruling that blocks the policy, saying it merely attests to a historical fact. What a joke. It merely attests to a historical fact. Okay, and doesn't violate equal protection. Under President Biden, Americans could self-select their gender, including a third X option, but that has now been paused. Well, let's get the take of political and media strategist AJ Bruno. AJ, welcome back to the show. Love to have you on. If you weren't aware, AJ, your skirmish with Matthew Stadlen, was it last week, went viral, so you did very well. Our viewers love you. Anyway, AJ, what's your take on this win today for the Trump admin?
Good to hear it. I hope you had a good trip to the Tower of London, Matthew. Good spot for him. Yeah, so I would say, look, this is a big deal. The Supreme Court, look, these are insane things, right? To have like limitless genders, you change your gender on your passport, or having the government have to require them to accommodate what is essentially mental illness. Yeah, this makes no sense. So the Supreme Court was right here, and hopefully it stays that way. I mean, you can't just make up anything you want and have it on an official government document, and then people raise a holy hell over nonsense. So yeah, this is a good decision. I think the court's going to keep to uphold this, and hopefully it stays this way permanently, because we don't need everyone deciding that they're a different gender or a third gender or no gender. It's chaos, it's nonsense, and this was the right call.
But why does it matter, AJ, to this administration? I can't think it's going to be much of a vote winner, doing this kind of thing. Yes, I think voters would want it, but I don't think it's going to sway too many people to the Republican side or the MAGA side. So why did President Trump's administration pursue this? Is it just ideological?
Yeah, I mean, that could be part of it, but also it's just common sense. If we establish a precedent, right, where you can change your birth sex on your passport, where does it go from there? That's what I think. A lot of these issues have a slippery slope. I already think this is too far, but if you go from there, who knows what kind of madness it could lead to. So I think we got to fight back against this woke, radical, far left social agenda in every way we can, because if we don't fight back against it, we see what happens. They keep pushing and pushing, and then we're defending crazier and crazier things. So you got to stand your ground somewhere, and I think this is an important issue to do that on.
Indeed, it's like the broken window theory. Deal with the small stuff and the big stuff will take care of itself. AJ, before I let you go, can I get your thoughts, please, on a massive breaking story tonight here in Washington, D.C. and indeed in the UK? The Trump administration has absolutely slammed the BBC, our national broadcaster in the UK, for fake news, basically saying that the purposefully, dishonestly, selectively edited clip by the BBC talking about the January 6th coverage is further evidence they are total 100% fake news that should no longer be worth the time on television screens for the great people of the United Kingdom. Every time I travel to the UK with President Trump, says Caroline Levitt, I'm forced to watch the BBC in our hotel room. It ruins my day listening to their blatant leftist propaganda. This is an extraordinary intervention, AJ, from the White House on the BBC. What's your take?
Yeah, look, as you would say in the UK, I think the BBC is rubbish. It's bollocks, right? So the kind of news they put out there is not real. It's their version of fake news. So I think this is important because we used to have a situation like we had real journalism, right? People reported the facts. You didn't inject ideology in it. You didn't try to put propaganda in the news. And they call themselves the British Broadcasting Company, but again, they have the same agenda that the government there has. It's a far left. It's biased. So I think they were right to do that. We got to fight back against any media outlet out there who's just dishonest, pushing lies. We need more outlets like GB News and less like the BBC. And maybe they'll wake up and actually, start reporting the facts. So I think this is great. Fight fire with fire, and I'm all for it.
Thank you, AJ. Appreciate that. And there's a reason our viewers are warming to you like the sun in an Orlando morning. There you go. There's a description for you. AJ, Bruno, thank you very much. Appreciate your company. Right, let's move on, shall we? It's been a pretty big week. Actually, I was at a Trump protest. I was at a Trump protest in DC this week, calling Trump a fascist, saying the US was a fascist state. And I asked one lady, I said, well, hang on a minute. There were elections last night in New York, Virginia, New Jersey, where the Democrats swept to very good success. So I said, on what planet is the United States a fascist state, which, of course, primarily is defined by there being a single party in operation, when the Democrats just 24 hours ago won huge elections, including Zoran Mamdani became the New York City's youngest ever mayor and the first Muslim leader. Of course, he's a massive socialist. Some accuse him of being a communist as well. But the mayor is already asking, of course, residents of New York to dip into their pockets. He's got the begging bowl out. Take a look.
On January 1st, I will be your mayor. New Year's Day and a new era for this city. Oh, and one more thing. Remember how I told you a few months ago to stop sending us money? You can start again. This transition requires staff, research, and an infrastructure that can meet this moment. And it will be made possible by the people who built and believe in this movement. So I hope you'll make a donation at transition2025.com. Now let's get to work.
Well, surprise, surprise. I think it was Margaret Thatcher, wasn't it, who said the socialism's great until we run out of other people's money. Well, Mamdani is asking again for other people's money. Joining me in Washington now is my panel, former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett and the Senior Research Fellow for Border Security and Immigration at the Heritage Foundation, Simon Hankinson. And Matthew Torbett, before the show's out, we have to address what you're up to in New York. You were on the campaign trail for Mamdani.
Yeah, it was interesting. I did the same last year for the presidential election. First of all, intrigued in making contacts. I love coming out to America and meeting other people involved in politics, but also to see how they do things. And to be honest, he was a candidate that genuinely excited me. Whether you believe what he can do is realistic is a case, another conversation. I'm not an idealist. The idea that, the governor, Kathy Hochul, said she doesn't want to raise taxes on New Yorkers. She said that before.
But they're going to have to, aren't they? So Mamdani, let's enlighten viewers, if you're not aware, viewers and listeners back home. He wants city or government-run grocery stores subsidised by the government. 5 of them. He wants free childcare for all children. He wants, free bus passes? What else does he want to do? Defund the police?
Free buses, yeah. Not just free bus passes, free bus. Defund the police, he's had to moderate his position. He's got to win over those people that were a bit unsure. The thing that I think was maybe misconstrued is he spoke a lot about social workers going visiting people, and I think he's looking at crime in the sense of prevention, and that saves you money in the long run. It also means you're not clogging up prisons and having people in this cycle, and we could probably do a lot similar in the UK, to be honest with you. I saw a candidate who the Democratic Party is in a bit of a bad place at the moment, and the talent pool is quite shallow. I genuinely have not seen a candidate with such charisma and likability since Obama. He's someone, you'd see him at a house party, someone you'd share a joint with, you'd have a laugh with and go, oh, he's all right, he's a football fan, he's a totally normal bloke, he come across as to me.
Well, OK. Well, Simon, you're shaking your head there. Also, is it a surprise that in a hugely blue state, it's a Democrat state, that in a mayoral election you have a guy who is a socialist Democrat who storms for election victory? It's no surprise, right?
It's no surprise that a Democrat wins, but it's kind of a surprise that a socialist / communist, it's basically the same thing.
Is he a commie?
Age 34. Well, you know, there's no communist country that ever calls itself communist. North Korea, Cuba, China, East Germany, they all call themselves socialist republics. So the difference between socialism and communism, it's a matter of degree.
China's got it in the name as the Communist Party.
If you want free stuff, free buses that someone else is going to pay for, rent control is another big thing you didn't mention.
Yes.
How does that happen? How do you say we're not going to raise the rent? Who pays for that? What landlord is going to want to invest in property, or want to repair property, build new houses when they're not going to make any money? So he's made a lot of promises, and just like that other charming guy Che Guevara, he's not going to deliver on them.
Yeah, Matthew, can you tell me of any other? This isn't a gotcha. I'm just genuine. It's a genuine question.
No, absolutely.
Can you tell me of any other socialist country that has succeeded / communist country? And also, that's another question: is socialism, communism, is it the same thing?
No and no. I don't think there is somewhere where it works. Now, the argument from people on that side of things will be it was never been allowed to be. You know, we live in a capitalist world, all the rest of it. I think the actual question, the more interesting question for the media and others is, with that being the case, why are so many people going to the polls saying capitalism doesn't work for me? They're clearly looking to alternatives.
Well, I can answer that.
That's where people are looking, and I think he was very disciplined at sticking to a cost of living message and on housing and the affordability of New York, and that cut through. And the one thing I pointed out to people the following day, I was astounded that somebody of his politics and of his demeanour won young men by 42 points.
Yeah.
That is not. You know,
but we all know the answers. We all know the answers to why that is.
Why is that?
Which is because young people, granted, they have a pretty tough time with things. They can't buy houses. They're not having families and children because they've not got decent homes to bring them up in. And I'm slightly conflicted on this. I think just make the best of the cards you've been dealt. But they would argue they've been stitched up by the boomers and the generations before them. So you've got a Muslim socialist mayor, a young guy. He's good looking. He's 34. You know, he talks very well, which is half the job done, regardless of policy. But this is some of his policies, right? Freeze rent citywide, build 200,000 affordable homes, so homes for everyone, free childcare for everybody, a $30 minimum wage, free bus passes across New York City, city-run grocery stores, so heavily subsidised food at a time when the cost of living is eye-watering, tax the rich to pay for it, of course, because it's the rich, it's the capitalists, the people who have done well, who have stitched you up. Obviously not true. End mayoral control of schools and go big on green retrofits and obviously community power over City Hall. So when you're a young person, Simon, who, you know, you're struggling. You haven't got a house, you haven't got a family, you haven't got a home, you're kind of wondering what the hell this life is all about. This guy comes along, he speaks well, he talks the talk, and why wouldn't you vote for him?
No, I do understand that. I've written about that. It's a real problem. He's the Pied Piper. He's blowing the tune, and the kids are following him off the cliff. So we on the right, capitalists, people who believe that this is the greatest engine for prosperity ever devised, we've got to tweak it. We've got to fix it so that there's a ladder for young people to be able to get jobs, to be able to earn money that they then get to keep and not give all to the government, and so that they have some hope. Otherwise, we're going to see a lot more Mamdanis and a lot more cities, and they're going to ruin them one by one.
Yeah, no, I completely understand why he was voted in by the youngsters. Matthew, finally, 30 seconds. What did you learn from US-style canvassing compared to, say, the UK?
It's message discipline and cost of living. That's a lot of things the Labour Party could take from this sort of stuff. I worry the Labour Party is going to do a Joe Biden and tell everybody everything is better, and when people look at their lot and go, no, it's not, you know, they'll be roundly kicked out. But no, I think there's something to be said about communicating and cutting through. I just don't think we have that at the moment in the the UK Labour Party, unfortunately. I don't think there is anybody that can do that in the current crop.
Yeah, and I think even President Trump has said, like Mamdani, he speaks well, he's got great delivery, which is half the
Very
job done.
quickly as well, not to be
10
discounted, Andrew Cuomo's still got 900,000 votes. Any other mayoral cycle, he wins a million times over. That was more votes than Eric Adams, and that was the most votes ever in 2021.
Great stuff. Right, thank you both for your company tonight. Thank you, viewers at home. I've read all your comments. Justin, I've just read yours. I really appreciate it. Thank you for spending your time with The Late Show Live tonight, and of course, indeed, to my panel. I'll see you back here tomorrow night, midnight in the UK, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The BBC will...
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good morning, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Now, it's a bit of a slow start for some of us, particularly towards the north and east today, but otherwise it is going to be a largely fine, often sunny day. Definitely the drier day of the weekend for most. That being said, as I mentioned, across some parts of Scotland and down the eastern side of England, there's a bit of cloud, there's some outbreaks of rain, but a lot of that's clearing away towards the northeast as we go through this morning with some fine sunny weather following in behind, albeit a bit of cloud and some rain pushing into western parts of Northern Ireland. Now, temperatures may not be quite as high as they were earlier on this week, but nonetheless they are still several degrees above average for the time of year, and with a decent amount of sunshine and some light winds, it's going to feel a bit warmer than you might expect for November. Now, as we go into this evening, are you heading away to a fireworks display? Well, the weather's looking fine for many places, except across Shetland. Could be a bit of rain, perhaps a bit of rain pushing into the Western Isles, but otherwise across much of Scotland and Northern England, it's fine with some clear skies around. Different story for Northern Ireland, cloud, rain pushing in from the west, the winds picking up too, but across the rest of England and Wales, well, it's looking fine and dry. The fine weather that we'll have through much of the day will continue as we go into the evening, so good news if you are planning to watch any fireworks. Later on overnight, we are going to see more cloud and rain spilling its way across Northern Ireland and into much of Scotland, staying dry with clear skies there across much of England and Wales. And with those clear skies, temperatures are going to drop a little bit lower than some recent nights. We could see temperatures in rural spots of England and Wales getting into low single figures, maybe even a touch of frost over some parts of Scotland. Obviously, the towns and cities will stay markedly milder. As we go into Sunday then, a dry start for many places, but cloud and rain is going to sweep its way eastwards. It's not looking particularly heavy, but there could be some heavier bursts, but also some drier interludes and something brighter following in from the west. Temperatures looking fairly similar to today, but obviously with less sunshine around, feeling a little less mild.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world. Am I allowed to talk then? No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay.